Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college. Great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly, an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, goes out of his way to not micromanage, didn't care as long as the work got done. Borderline forced people to take PTO. We have unlimited and I averaged 30 to 40 days half a year. And believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. Last 3 years I got 9%, 13% in a promotion and 7% raises. We worked remote through COVID and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the HCOL city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. Boss approved the change, and when HR tried to do a COL adjustment to my salary, boss told him no because I'll be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people, the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I've been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the years, but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized into working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different than the team's normal day-to-day work. We've been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. Boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up, we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. Super complex. $100,000 to millions lost if a mistake was made. And since it was the fastest growing part of the business by far, we were super busy. Now, around 2 years ago, boss's boss gets promoted from his VP role up to an SVP spot and hires a new VP. This new VP comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly, tries to make everything a trackable metric, even where it really doesn't make sense, i.e. tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. Counted as one even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks. Or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. Wanted each project to go out faster, even if they weren't due for a week, we were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. Tried to force my boss to assign work to the team instead of us, all picking up from a central queue as we could. And so on and so on. Boss pushed back as much as possible but was getting crapped on constantly by the new VP. Because the useless metrics VP wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations, despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago, boss had enough of just getting consistently crapped on by this VP and took a new job and left. Boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few 100 employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role, as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. VP interviews most tenured and a bunch of external candidates and goes with someone from his previous company. Now this lady will be referred to as witch boss from here on out, for soon to be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom, changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say, started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. The team went from the best in the company to the worst. It took Witch Boss about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and try to rework our processes. Witch Boss started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she's doing, and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us for about our metrics being the worst on a team. Despite us working on the super complex projects that took 10 to 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did, which boss told us that if we didn't meet the expected metrics, we would be put on PIPs. So we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric. X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos as my small sub-team suddenly stopped picking up complex projects and just focused on completing simple projects to get our metrics up. Very quickly the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response. Which boss has told us we have to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately, that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact which boss for help getting them completed. This did not go over well with her or VP as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric but still insisted we work on the complex ones as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the SVB got involved. The SVB was the one who created the complex subteam to begin with and sided with us against the VB and witch boss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a PIP. So we did. At this point, the other 3 people on a sub-team had seen the writing on a wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave ASAP. They were all office-based in the HCOL area still. Which boss changed the team from coming in 1 to 2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office. Most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her BS than I did remotely. I had not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding/honeymoon before he left. This happened about 3 months after the witch boss started, and about a month after the whole PIP blow-up. Witch boss was pissed at how we showed her up in front of the SVP and was doing everything she could to make our life miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left. No notice. And one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the PIP fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus, with morale so low, we didn't bother to put any extra effort anymore. In fact, the whole team was significantly behind as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So witch boss decided that she was cancelling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her there was no chance I am missing my wedding and honeymoon for work and I am taking the full leave and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She BS'd, yelled, and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was cancelled and if I didn't show up, it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied CCing VB and SVB and some other sales VPs who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation. It is my wedding honeymoon, and that I appreciated the opportunity but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from the witch boss. I got Slack messages from SVP and several of the sales VPs almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by the witch boss and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I wouldn't be there at all to work on them and so on. SVB eventually shut it down, but it was a fun read. I didn't reply to the Slack messages or do any work the rest of that day, just turned everything off, I went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning and very hungover to a few voicemails on my phone from SVB asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the SVB. He was very understanding, asked me to come back, listened to all my complaints, and eventually made an offer. Basically, if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus. I would get my full PTO, and when I got back, which boss would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub-team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted. Weddings are freaking expensive. So I tried to train people to cover for me. Impossible task, by the way. Then leave on my PTO. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. VB called me a few times when the first guy from my sub-team quit. Was no notice about 1.5 weeks in, but I ignored him and didn't respond. I come back refreshed and ready for the crap show I know is waiting. It was chaos. All the salespeople were slacking and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving hadn't been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my Slack and emailed the sales VBs directly asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Which boss never tried to talk to me or interfere. VB did a few times. At one point he tried to make me work weekends to catch up, but I refused. This went on for about a month or so, which boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub-team and I never brought it up. They did, however, had a larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 46 months training process my old boss developed was ignored and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end, which resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I had started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in the same later stages but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from which boss to go over my bonus/raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus, lowest possible by the way, and a 0% raise. Justified it with a bunch of BS. Not a team player, metrics bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires and so on and so on. I didn't really argue or care at that point. At that point I really quietly quit. Got my daily output to below half, just at the bare minimum. I waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point the sales team is getting pissed because the complex stuff basically isn't getting done. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise/bonus, but with me barely working everything was falling behind again. Which boss smelled weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started chewing me out on the call in front of everyone, saying that I was lazy and not doing my job and so on. I let her rant, then just said, if you give me the lowest bonus possible and 0 raise, you get 0 effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job. And I left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains and so on to call me out for not working, and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on Slack, and just responded with a 0% effort blurb on every email. This infuriated her. I still hadn't gotten another job offer but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when the VP set up a Zoom call with me, I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side, and I told him for a 0% raise I'm giving 0 effort, and he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise/bonus. He has to approve the bonus/raise amounts. I called him out on his BS and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I didn't go back to my old level of output and said the people I have been training in complex projects could take over for me soon, so I wasn't as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about. I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging the witch boss asking about the training because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. Agreed it was awful of the witch boss to do that to my bonus/raise and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point and knew he needed me more than I needed him, so I told him I need a 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary, or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen and so on, so I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait and he bring SVB onto the call. SVB tried to talk my demand down. At that point I realized it wasn't worth it and I refused a significantly lower counter offer. Thanked by SVB for everything he did for me and said I was quitting immediately. VP tried to say I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period, and I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here, so I didn't care and locked off. SVB tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so, but I refused. A few weeks later I got a job offer and I accepted it. I've been working at the new company for a while now and it's pretty crappy. Better than the old company, but nowhere close to where I had before was my old boss. Although the old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for. So I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit. He refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave ASAP and everything, even the simple stuff is weeks overdue. Apparently the witch boss is getting thrown under the bus by VB and will be fired soon. I never imagined a simple trip to Walmart would turn into a story I'd feel compelled to share on r/entitled people, but here we are. It's been a tough couple of weeks for my family, especially for my 10-year-old son Danny, who recently broke his leg in a nasty bicycle accident. Confined mostly to our home, he's been hobbling around on crutches, yearning for a bit of normalcy. So when he asked if he could join me for a grocery run, I saw it as an opportunity for him to get some fresh air. To make the trip easier, I decided to use the old wheelchair my late mother had used in her final days. My 15-year-old daughter Sarah came along too, helping push her brother's chair, while I navigated our shopping cart through the aisles of Walmart. We were having a surprisingly good time, laughing and joking as we picked up everything on our list. After about 45 minutes, we made our way to the checkout line, ready to head home. But just as we settled at the end of the queue, I remembered I'd forgotten to grab some bread. Telling my kids to wait, I dashed off, confident I'd be back in a jiffy. I couldn't have been gone for more than 5 minutes, but when I returned, the scene before me was like something out of a nightmare. Danny was on the floor, written all over his face extreme pain, clutching his cast-cover leg, and the wheelchair lay on its side next to him. And Sarah was screaming angrily at a woman standing in front of her. Bystanders had gathered around trying to intervene as tensions escalated. My heart sank as I rushed to my son, fear and confusion overwhelming me. What's happened? I asked, trying to make sense of the chaos. Through tears and shouts, Sarah pieced together the story for me. It turned out that while I was gone, a woman, who Sarah referred to as Karen in her retelling, had tried to cut in front of them in a line. Danny, ever the brave soul, called her out on it. An argument ensued during which this woman, infuriated by my son's insistence on fairness, kicked his wheelchair with such force that it tipped over, sending him crashing to the ground. But she didn't stop there. She went on to kick Danny's broken leg, accusing him of faking his injury for sympathy. That's when Sarah lost it and lunged at her, but was quickly bowled back by onlookers. As I comforted Danny, trying to assess the damage, the manager and a couple of employees rushed over, having been alerted to the disturbance. One of them had already called the police and an ambulance. Within minutes, officers were on a scene trying to untangle the mess of accusations and shouting. The woman was still there ranting about how she was being wronged, even as customers who had witnessed the entire ordeal spoke up, recounting the event to the authorities. The police reviewed the store's CCTV footage, which clearly showed the woman's outrageous actions. She was arrested and taken away, much to the relief of everyone involved. Danny, though in pain, was brave throughout the ordeal. An ambulance was called to make sure his leg wasn't further damaged, and thankfully it seemed like there was no serious additional injury. But we knew we'd be making a few extra visits to the doctor to be sure. We went home that day a bit shaken, but closer than ever. We've had to explain to Danny that not all people are good, and sometimes you can encounter individuals who will act irrationally and cruelly. But we've also talked about the importance of standing up for who you love, like his sister did for him. And that's pretty much my story. I really hope that Karen will get locked behind bars for a long time. In 1998, I was a schoolboy in America and I was bullied by a boy called Ben. Frequently, he would taunt and shout racial slurs whenever he saw me. This bullying continued for a few months and it ended as he got bored of me as I just began to pluck him out. After the bullying stopped, I cruised along doing my thing and then one day, I saw him hit a girl. She was a nice girl, not that I fancied her in any way, but she was a nice girl. At first, I didn't want to get involved, but since we shared the same English class, I talked to her about it, and she said she was fine, and he was just being playful and sweet. I could tell that she wasn't fine and she was just scared. The next day, I went to the principal's office and brought up the issue. In the afternoon, Ben, the bully, and I were called in to give our sides of the issue. We were in the principal's office for well over an hour and Ben played the crybaby give me sympathy card, and it worked. When I left school that day, I was kicked over by Ben and kicked in the stomach by him. When this happened, I was pissed. So I got up, went over to Ben, and punched him in the face. The next morning I went in and was so called out of lessons to talk to the principal about this, and the principal agreed with me and I got away. This pissed off Ben. The next 2 weeks went by as normal and then my parents were announcing that we were moving back to England. I was over the moon about this as I had emigrated to America as a baby and always wanted to experience British life. The next day I went in and told my best friend Kyle about this and he was gutted. I told him that we keep in contact by email and letters. This calmed him down and he was okay in the end. In the summer of 1999, it was my final day before moving to England, so I brought in donuts for my class and friends. In the morning of that day, I went to the assembly and announced that I'd be giving some sweets away to everyone at the end of the day in the playground. My day went on and I got lots of farewell cards and gifts which I was quite happy with. The last bell went, so I headed to the playground with my sweets and started giving them out. I got "We're gonna miss you" mini speeches from people and then I could see Ben coming over, so I said to Kyle, "Hand the rest of the sweets out." I walked up to Ben and gave him a huge punch in the stomach and then a few blows to the head. Everyone was going mad about this and I knew the teachers would be arriving soon, so I said to Kyle, "Tell them it was me." And he agreed. I ran out to the school and went to my grandma's house, and when I went in, I asked if I could run out to the shops which happened to be near a post office. At my grandma's house, I had left my PS1 from the other week and I had wrapped it in a parcel form and put Kyle's address on label. I ran to the post office and sent the parcel. The next day I left for England and I settled in quite well. I was in the first months of being at my new house. I got a letter from Kyle reading, "Thank you for the PS1, you are my best friend and always will be your friend, Kyle." I got revenge for that girl which Kyle ended up dating, and the bully actually got expelled at 13 for smoking weed behind a tree at school. This story is about a person with diplomatic immunity. Before I dive into the story, first a little something to note about these diplomats. Yes, they do have immunity, but to an extent. They cannot be prosecuted in the hosting country unless their home country waives the immunity.
For example, they can drive over the speed limit and when they get a ticket, nothing happens. However, they need to respect the host country's laws and regulations. They are not exempted from any security check. When they want to enter a building where a security check is mandatory before entering, they have to undergo that check or they will be refused access. This is important for the story. Only their diplomatic luggage are exempted from any security check. These luggages are sealed with an official stamp, and the diplomat needs to have the correct documents with them signed and stamped by their embassy. Also, for the sake of the story to make sense, some of these diplomats are in a position of an airport badge. In order for them to have access at some parts of the airport, to collect someone from the gate or guide someone to their gate without having to buy a ticket to gain access. They have a different color, green/bluish in my airport, than a regular airport badges, white. Long intro I know, but here we go. This happened in January 2020. I was already working as a supervisor. I sat behind my desk doing my admin work when my fellow supervisor said there was a long queue at our staff lane. We were very busy at the moment and I didn't have anyone available to help out, so I went out there and supported my colleagues at the staff lane. I positioned myself as a third person at our WTMD, walk-through metal detector. Every staff member needs to show me their airport badge when they pass the detector. I just check the details there and then they can continue their way. Things went smoothly and we were almost through most of the queue after about 10 minutes. Q our above-mentioned diplomat. It's only fitting to call her Karen. I spotted her skipping the queue and walking straight towards us, her green/bluish badge at the ready. I stood in front of her and said, "Good afternoon, ma'am. How may I help you today?" Without looking at me, she just waved her badge in my face and tried to continue her way. My colleague blocked the entrance of the detector and asked the same thing. Karen then said, still waving her badge, "Move out of the way, you idiot. I'm a diplomat." My colleague then tells her, "Can do, ma'am. You need to put all your belongings in a tray first and have them go through the scanner. Then you need to walk through this gate pointing at the detector so you can continue your way." "Are you deaf? I'm a diplomat. It's your supervisor now." My colleague pointed at me and all I did was smile and wave. "Tell this idiot he needs to let me through now. I'm a diplomat. I'm exempt from any security check." I tell her, first of all, you are not exempted in any way, shape, or form. You're supposed to know this. Secondly, you're also not exempted from following the queue. And lastly, my colleague is not an idiot. If this is the way you're going to treat me or any of my colleagues, you will be refused access. I then point my hand towards the back of the queue. Keep that in mind. Karen starts screaming, "So you're an idiot as well? I'm a diplomat." She then took a deep breath and looked up to the ceiling and back at me with a smirk and says, "I'll get you and that guy." Nods her head towards my colleague. "Just you wait. You haven't seen the last of me." She then screamed, "How dare you treat me this way?" She didn't scream it in an angry manner but more in an emotional way. Also important for later. I thought maybe she had a bad day and didn't say anything from that point forward as she walked away crying. Later that day, my operational manager called me in his office. He told me there was a complaint against me. Wonder who it's from? He said that Karen told the airport I treated her poorly and threatened to physically remove her from the airport if she didn't get out of my sight. Now I know why she started crying. My operational manager then showed me the CCTV footage, which kinda confirmed her story in a way. When the footage showed me pointing my hand to the queue, my operational manager said, "This is where she said you threatened to assault her." I laughed and shook my head. I told my side of the story, even commentating live while we rewatched the CCTV. My operational manager said he believes me, but that the airport never received my side of the story as I didn't try to report. I also didn't notify my security inspector of the incident, which made me look suspicious to the airport. The airport wanted my operational manager to sanction me in a way he seemed fit. They wanted to take away my airport badge at first because a complaint came from the embassy itself. She probably left out the fact she tried to bypass security. But my operational manager said that I probably didn't have the time to write a report yet, which was true of course, and that he would deal with me. He told me he would keep a close eye on me and I should report everything from here on out. So yeah, I almost lost my job because of this Karen. Great. Now the revenge. When I was passing through staff lane not long after that, I saw her again. She was on her way to the staff entrance again. I avoided eye contact and I walked through the detector and then thought, screw it. I wasn't in the wrong here. So I described her to my colleague, Ben, as he was verifying my badge and said that she's a troublemaker, so to just let her come through the detector, greet her, ask her badge, and tap me on the shoulder. He said, sure thing, Chief. She walks towards the detector, bag and all, and passes through. Meanwhile, I was standing over my tray getting my wallet and keys and so on, not once looking at my surroundings. Ben then tapped me on the shoulder and said, can you look at this? I took the badge and turned around facing my colleague. Is she standing to the side? When Ben turned around to verify, I quickly ripped the hologram sticker. Without this, the badge is invalid. I looked at Karen, I put my hand on Ben's shoulder and thanked him. I greet her. Hello again, madam. Welcome. I just need to verify your badge if you don't mind so you can be on your way in just a second. Karen tasted victory. Finally, you've learned some manners. Oh dear. I am sorry, but your badge is invalid. Excuse me? Yes, look, your hologram is completely gone. I then looked up to her and then quickly turned my head back and forth between her and the detector several times. I then turned my head around to look at the back of our checkpoint and then back at her. What are you doing? I pointed behind my back to the end of the checkpoint saying, did you just come from over there? Karen shouts. No, jerk. I came from over there. She points at the entrance. Can you please calm down, madam? I lifted my hands and took a step back. I can sort this out for you. Do you mind standing to the side there? She complied and I asked for her diplomatic passport. I said I needed to go run it through my system to validate. She handed it over and told me to hurry up. Ben watched her as I went to my desk. According to our SOB standard operating procedures, the only options I had was either A. refuse the access myself like I did before, or B. to go to my inspector, explain the situation and be done with it. He would send Karen back for a new badge and probably would have forced her to go through security or escort her out. Problem solved. However, I already had a plan, and it was already set in motion. I first called the airport police department and said that I have a female here who's refusing to be checked, claiming to be a diplomat. They asked if the inspector was around and I said I haven't seen him. They would send out a patrol immediately. Great. Another colleague who returned from her break was waiting to be put to work, so I ordered her to replace Ben and sent him to my desk. A minute or so later, Ben came to me saying that Karen was getting frustrated, and he asked me what was going on. I briefly told him what's happened before and I informed him of my plan. Now Ben was a new guy who just started, but he was a cool guy. He was a bouncer before he came to the airport, so he knows how these Karens can be. He liked the plan and said, you know what, Chief? I wasn't sure if a diplomat was exempted from a security check or not. Honest mistake. Sorry. He winked and smirked at me. I told him to start typing up his incident report as I headed back to Karen. Meanwhile, the police arrived and I handed over the passport and badge. This lady refuses to go through security. She threatened me for the second time today, saying I would lose my job. She also gave a false statement to the airport about me, risking me to lose my job. I was speaking in my language, so Karen did not understand a word. If you rewatch the CCTV footage from this hour, you will see that she aggressively came at me after pointing out her badge was invalid. I also didn't see where she came from, and when I asked if she passed security, she started freaking out. One of the officers said, okay, we will take her with us and explain what's going on. Another officer informs Karen that she needs to come with him, and she just gasped at the officer and looked at me in disbelief. I then told the police officers, great, thank you. Oh, and by the way, I want to press charges against her for slandering me. Sure, just follow us. Karen started to get frustrated but had no option than to follow us, as we had all her documents. I radioed my fellow SVB, saying I'm going with the police and it would take a while. When I returned a few moments later, Ben showed me his report. It was perfect. I typed up mine and sent both reports to my operational manager. I informed him that I did file a complaint against her with the police, and I returned home smiling. My operational manager's response the next day was that he heard of the incident and he notified the corporation, who in turn filed a complaint through their legal team against Karen. The results: I never saw Karen again at the airport. A few months ago, May, my operational January informed me that our complaints were noted by the court and have been sent to Karen's home country. Charges were slander and attempting to enter a security-restricted area and bypassing security. Turns out Karen was just an assistant, specifically a driver for some higher-ranked diplomats. Basically meaning that she didn't even have the same privileges or immunities as a real diplomat has. She lost her diplomatic passport persona non grata and has been sent back to her country. The airport also apologized to me. Not personal.